Seeing Beyond, Living Transformed is a spiritual crossing of the threshold to the world of being a truly expanded human being. Hosted by mediums Cheryl Murphy and Kelley Eckhart.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this evening of Seeing Beyond Living Transformed. We have a very special show tonight, and we're so happy that you're joining us. As you're logging on and watching us live tonight, please let us know in the comment section, and we'd love to hear from you and maybe take your questions later on in the show. But right now, let me just say hello to my colleague, Kelley Eckhart, and just say, hi, Kelley, how are you tonight?
I am great, thank you. And I'm so excited to meet Suzane and to interview her tonight and learn all about her.
Oh, that's fantastic. And well, let's get going. Hi, Suzane. We have Suzane Northrop with us this evening, a fantastic medium who's written several books. She has, of course, her own website, SuzaneNorthrop.com. We're lucky enough that she's still doing private readings because she does so much in her teaching and mentorship programs. But let me introduce Suzane Northrop. How are you this evening? We're so grateful that you're with us.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Always happy to be with California people when I'm in New York.
It's great that you're here. And we just want to tell you how thrilled we are to have you, Suzane. I mean, you have been a medium. You've been tested by Gary Schwartz, the amazing scientist and researcher who really provides validation through the scientific method on mediums. So thank you for doing that. And I believe you scored the highest or something of all the mediums. Is that right?
I was part of the first slew of studies, which was in the 90s, and it was it was filmed by HBO. And of course,
wow.
when HBO gets involved with all these things, there's all these little background stories.
Wow.
And, what was it called? The HBO special?
It's called Life After Life.
Life After
Life.
Life.
After Life.
Yes. And actually, for several years, I don't know if they do it as much, but because they can't restrain themselves. But HBO used to run it during Halloween. That used to do like a weekly of it. But it was kind of like a big deal at the time because first of all, it was the first one of its studies. And one thing I will say about Dr. Schwartz is that I would say that he's probably in reality the science person that has seen more mediums than probably anybody else in the last 25 years, 30 years. Absolutely. Wow. And it's interesting because it's at the very beginning, and I wouldn't bring up names, but there were people that were that were in the public eye and known that were asked to be a participant as part of the studies, and they wouldn't do it.
Is that right?
Well, you're really put on the spot. First of all, you're being tested. First of all, you're being graded. And the way that they did the studies, I don't know if either one of you guys have ever seen the documentary.
What, Life After Life?
Yes.
No, I haven't seen it.
What about you, Kelley?
I haven't. I might have seen it. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
We're actually looking for the link. We're going to post it here for everybody who would like to see it. If I haven't seen it, I'm going to watch it tonight. I think
they have. If they don't have the whole thing, they have clips in YouTube.
Right.
But sort of like the structure of the whole kind of the structure of the studies was that, well, first of all, I don't know if you guys have ever worked with a scientist, but they got like they got their own little rhythms. It's like
yeah.
And what they do is the whole premise of how you do science is based on data, and which data is what proves something to be true or not to be true. So, Gary, when we first of all, I was approached by him. I was actually approached by Lisa Jackson, who was the producer. And by the way, it was done with Linda Ellaby, who's quite well-known journalist.
Oh, I love her.
Yeah, it was her company, Lucky Duck.
Oh.
And so the whole premise was to try to prove consciousness of course, after death. And somehow somebody got wind that he was trying to do this stuff because he was a tenured professor in Arizona, and the whole thing was that he was kind of doing it underground because he's a tenured professor. He was a little nervous that they were going to sort of find out what he was doing, and And then when they did, they approached him and they said, listen, if we could bring you, because that time he was like working with, no disrespect for one woman who was a housewife. So she wasn't a professional. She was just kind of doing it under the table, probably literally, and they said, if we could bring you, 4 or whatever, 5 of the top mediums in the country, would you allow us to film it?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, he was a pig in, because this is what he'd been looking for, to have professionals. So I got contacted. George Anderson got contacted. John Everett got contacted. Yes, and another woman who's no longer actually kind of with us. But so there was the 5 of us. And so when he originally approached it, like I said, I was asked from the beginning, and I actually declined, to be honest, because I said I don't need wires put to my head. I've already done that to prove I can do this. And so I walked away from the project. And then what happened is that they said, Gary, you got to contact Suzane directly, because they really wanted me. So he called me up, and I found out he was from Long Island, and we share a sun sign. And anyway, so he talked me into doing it. And so he had, and like I said, I don't know if you ever worked with a scientist, but he came up with this document. It was about this big.
Yeah.
You couldn't even begin to read it, understand what the hell it was talking about. I says, Gary, first of all, mediums don't work that way. They all have their own rhythm. They all have their own way. It's not like you hit a computer printout. It's like, it doesn't work that way. So you got to work with the rhythm of how they work. So we devised, and interesting, John had a background in medical stuff. So he did that, the EKG we had on it. And so what we did is we worked out a premise where we had obviously a subject whom we got through Judy Guggenheim, and I'm sure you're both familiar with Judy Guggenheim. She wrote the book.
Yes.
She was actually the one that coined ADC, which is after death communications.
Mm-hmm.
And so because we needed to have a subject that lived somewhere in Tucson, Arizona. So because she had done that, she had people from all over that had ADCs that she, got connected with. So she found out there was a woman, her name was Patricia Price, who'd had a lot of intense deaths. So what they did is they used her as a subject. So they had a sort of a screen between us, and Gary was at the computer doing all the data, and she was she was on the one side, and we were on the other side. We couldn't see her. We didn't know what her name. We knew nothing about her, and we're pretty much we're only adopted because it's data, yes and no questions. So it would be like it was like is this person this? Is that person that? And whatever. So then all that data was put into the machine. And then it goes like a graph, literally like a graph is. And what it did is it did each medium. Now, the sort of the idea about is that so you're working under a grief premise. So you're going to have data under a grief. You're going to know what each percentage of each medium is, but you're going to know what the total is.
Okay.
So I learned, which I never knew, of course, is that Arizona was a basketball town.
Okay.
And so they used the basketball premise. And I could say to you, who was the most well-known whatever basketball person? This was, you got to figure this was a few years ago because it was in the 90s. And who would you all come up with, guys?
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Right. Now, but then it would have been Michael Jordan.
Oh, Michael Jordan then.
Yes. So what do you think his percentage of accuracy is per game?
Oh, God, a lot. A lot.
Actually not.
No, really?
It's actually only 40%.
Really?
But
I would have guessed more than that. Yeah.
But he's part of a team.
Right.
And the team may score in the 80 to 90 percentile, but the individual may not. So anyway, so we put all this data together,
right.
and as a team, we scored into the 90 percentile.
Yeah, right. Well, I can see why that's so important.
Right.
That's pretty amazing.
Yes.
Actually.
And I won't tell you who scored the highest because that would be bragging. But since it's been published, I can kind of do that.
You can tell us.
Yes, it was me. And so, and then he was so happy to have us show. We actually ended up doing each, 2 more studies afterwards. Actually, John and I did 3 times, and each time it got more difficult. And the way that it did difficult, I'm sure you've heard him talk about blind studies. Well, the way you do blind studies is that we would do things where we would have people behind us we didn't know who they were, male, female, young, old, or whatever it was, and they weren't allowed to talk to us. So we had to work totally under that blind. So it got more difficult and more difficult. And that's why a lot of people didn't want to do it, because it's your reputation. And,
Sure.
you know, so anyway, so I was very pleased. I was extremely pleased that I did it at the time I did it, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Lot of
It's
work.
very stressful. And,
Yeah.
you know, you had to do the whole thing, literally a shot in like 2 days, 3 days.
Yeah.
So, you know, you're really kind of under the collar, so to speak.
Yeah.
But then he published the book, The
Mhm.
Afterlife Experiments. And I know you guys being mediums, you're going to appreciate this. Everybody, of course, knows of Randy, you know, Randy, the one that, you know, called everybody frauds and will give you $1 million proof about it. So they had him and his associate, believe it or not, brought into to Gary's studio. Now, the other little information which I will give you is that HBO didn't trust Linda Ellaby, and Linda Ellaby didn't trust HBO.
Oh.
And Gare as well, because they can make you look great when you're not, and they can make you look awful when you're good. And I mean,
Right.
anybody that's done media, you both know what I'm talking about. And
Right.
so what they did is that Gary, to this day, still owns all the original data. He wasn't going to have his reputation
them.
ruined. Yes. So he still
Oh.
has the original data. So he used that original data, and what he did is he had one of Randy's kind of people came and look at it, and they actually were studying me, and he was like, okay, how could she have possibly known what she did, and do you think she's a fraud or whatever it was?
Oh.
And basically they really admitted it was impossible for me to know what I did under the circumstances. So that was actually that'll never also be published because they can't do that because that's how they make their millions anyway. But
Yeah.
it was a really quite wonderful experience. And I think for me what happened is that, you know, because I had always been so much involved, you know, with media. I had my own television show, and you know, and I've been on every radio station in the country. But
Right.
is that I after that. Now, not that I didn't continue to do media because I always did, but I really started leaning towards science, and I felt like that was really important because, you know, we first of all we anybody who's done this work for however long you've done it, you're always up to, you know, either being made fun of or you got to prove it all the time. You always got to do the dog and pony show, and the truth is that what we do is extremely important work.
Yeah. It's
You
really,
know, it's really important work.
well, that's,
And,
you know, just working with you, Suzane, and I've known you for a long time. You know, just working with you, you can tell the integrity you have, and really that you are bringing through, really with reverence. You know, I really know that you so highly regard the spirit world. You so highly appreciate that gift that you have or the talent you have. And I just want to tell you that it's always an honor and a joy to watch you work. It really is. You bring
thank
through
you. Thank you.
it's not only the evidence that you bring through, but the feeling from the spirit world about how excited they are to be here,
Hmm.
or what a wonderful thing they think it is as well.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, over the years, considered as long as I've been doing this, I've actually only worked with really pretty much a handful of mediums, believe it or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And obviously you're one of them, Cheryl. And
Thanks.
so I think that, you know, you and as you know, you are always your association is extremely important. So, you know, you want to work with somebody obviously who's gifted at what they want to do, but you also want to work that they have some ethics because that's so significant. And you know, and because I've been around for a long time, I came from old school, and in old school there were certain things you just do when you don't do,
Right.
and some of the things that people do, I don't have to go into it, that they do on television is really just not ethical. This work, it's just not.
I agree totally. And
Um,
people expect that.
they
Because they
expect
see it
that,
on,
but
they saw it on TV, you
right,
know?
but the truth is, you know, Kelley, is that, you know, if somebody had just lost, let's say somebody just lost their son, you know, 3 weeks before, and they happen to be going to a restaurant or they happen to be going to the beauty parlor, and then all of a sudden, you know, this person out of the blue comes up to them and starts talking about their dead son. That's so disrespectful.
I would be upset. I lost my son. If somebody did that to me, I would have been like, who are you? And stay away.
So I just happened to
I
say
wasn't
that.
ready.
I guess I just happened to say that.
I think you just
Not even knowing. So
picking up in the spirit world. So
yeah, so it's like, and and so to know that this, you know, grieving mom, the last thing she would need in a public arena of quietness. You know, it's like just to somebody, and then all of a sudden turn around. There's cameras and this and that, and it's nerve wracking and disrespectful more than anything else. It's disrespectful. So that's what becomes then the gold plate of our work, which we know that's the farthest thing in the world from the gold plate of our work.
Right.
But it's if it's you want to seek a certain amount of fame. Listen. I have been I have been offered. I could tell you at least 5 or 6 times my own written television show. I did do it in Canada. It ran for about a year. It's probably the only television show that there are no edits. It was completely raw. They had no money for edits, and you got it raw. And that stuff, of course, you can see that on my website. But it's called The Afterlife. Anyway, I walked away from projects because there were things that they wanted me to do, and I just wouldn't do it.
Good for you.
I agree.
There's not enough. I mean, there's really not enough money in the world that can repair it. I think your reputation, because I think your reputation is gold. But that's me, and I'm not.
I feel like a lot of the shows nowadays are more sensationalized to put fear into people because fear sells.
Yes.
And to me, that really messes with people who need a reading because they see these shows and then they get scared. And I feel like we need more shows that show the love of mediumship and how it works, but with boundaries and with rules, not where they're walking up to strange people in public.
Right. But you also know that that's the whole gist, unfortunately, of television is about sensationalism.
Yes.
And there are so many reality shows. I don't even know about a 16th of them that are on TV because I don't really watch mainstream TV. But people will say do I know this show? I have no idea. But and that's sort of part of it. But you know what? As long as there are folks like us out there that's important, and because the thing is, the way I look at it is that, if at this point with that world flooded, which it is totally flooded, if you are able to still stand and make a living at it, then clearly you're doing something right, because there's a lot of people that are if one says if you totally believe in competition, they say anybody can be replaced. I think that's true, but I do think that there are certain people that
there's no competition with mediumship. I feel
I agree, because there's going to be somebody's going to be right for somebody else, and somebody else is going to be right for somebody else, and that's just I think that's just the way it is.
And you know what Mavis Patilla used to say, and I love this saying, is that we don't build our reputation here on earth. We're building our reputation over there in the spirit world. And the spirit world really helps bring us our people.
Of course, without them, there's no program.
But I mean, they kind of show their loved ones this is the medium you need. And I feel like that's so true.
Yes.
In my work, my business, I really feel like it's been, spirit guided, all of my business. It's so interesting how it works.
Yes.
I will be super busy when I'm feeling great, and when I'm feeling fatigued or having medical issues, it's like my business just sort of slows off, not because of me. Right. It's like the universe just knew, okay, she's tired, she needs to take care of her health, and then it speeds back up again when I'm feeling better, and I love that. It's not like I have to plan it. It sort of evolves and happens for me.
Yes. And how somebody will be, in the bookstore and in the cooking section because my book called The Medium's Cookbook sometimes ends up in the cooking section.
Yeah.
And they'll happen to pick it up in the cooking section and go I don't think this is about cooking.
There's no coincidences. That happens for a reason.
Yes.
Can we mention your books, Suzane? Because I have read that you have some books that are in different languages. That's how well they're selling, and what the attraction is and the interest is, and how many people you're being able to reach. So I think your cookbook is your last book, right?
My cookbook is my last book, and that's actually probably the only one that's not put in other languages. However, my first one, believe it or not, the first language you got picked up in was Japanese.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and contrary to what a lot of people do not know, is that the Japanese happen to be extremely into mediums. constantly.
Yes, they are.
Yes,
Are
they
they?
are.
And
Oh,
China.
I had no
Yeah,
idea.
yes, yeah. So my first book was put into Japanese. Of course, it's been put into to Spanish and Italian and English. And
Amazing.
what's kind of the interesting about the Japanese thing is you probably would know this. Well, Kelley, it sounds like you might know this. Is that they have a whole thing of generational responsibilities. So if you have a grandfather or a grandmother or whomever it was, even whether it's great grand, and whatever they might have done in life, you're responsible for that karma. And it's the only sect that I'm aware of that does that. So
Now, is that though part of Buddhism?
I don't think it's part of Buddhism. I think it's
They
part of
do that in Buddhism too.
I know, because in Buddhism they also believe that you can be going back as animals and stuff like this. But
Yeah,
this is a particular sect in Japanese, and I wish I could remember it because I always forget it. But it's more in the cultural stuff than just on the spiritual line. But it's really more on the cultural thing where karmically, if, like I said, you are responsible for, and if it's interesting if you think about this. And I'm sure because you've encountered this as well, is that if there is one, I'm going to use you as an example, Kelley, if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
If there's if there's a child lost in the family, I guarantee you it's not the only child that's lost in the family in terms of generational.
Yeah.
Now, my grandmother lost a son, and I lost a nephew. So, so it's you'll learn that a lot of times there are, if there are twins, maybe one lives and one does. There's really something that has something to do with generational thing. And of course, since you choose your parents, you choose that program, and if it's in that program and you're supposed to obviously be part of whatever that program is, you know that there's going to be more than one. So that's one of the things that I have found that's so interesting, is that I'll find constant parallels in families. And
I like that you brought that up.
Yeah, and it's kind of a really, really interesting thing because, like I said, there's always, like I said, it generally has to do with what I would call the big stuff. Like if you've lost a mother young, somebody else in the family's lost a mother long. I mean, it's just there's that kind of repeated pattern.
Well, I lost my son, and when he was 20. My mother didn't lose a son, but she put one up for adoption for her first child.
Same thing, almost.
And I know now he's passed. I mean, I don't know for 100% sure, but he comes to me. I get readings a lot, and they bring through my brother, and I'm like, and he always comes through as the brother I never got to meet.
Right.
But I met him in spirit because I remember meeting him in spirit, and I remember seeing him be born 13 years before I was born. So actually, I've always felt connected to him. In the weirdest way, even though he's 13 years older than me. Yeah. And then my son and his brother were like 12, almost 13 years apart.
Wow.
And they're really close. My older one that passed.
And I'm sure you've also realized that there are a lot of people that sometimes have better relationships with people after they've crossed over than they did when they were here.
Oh yeah, my dad.
That's a real common one. I know a lot of people they struggle with relationships, and then all of a sudden they cross over, and it's like, you don't have the sort of the stuff in the middle, and so it's like you can, if you choose to, and the truth is, you should, because if you don't, you never get through that stuff. The stuff is just always there. I mean, it's just
Someone has written in, if I may, white, gold, yellow. There's a question for you. Can Suzane talk about the biggest realizations she's had via her mediumship gifts?
Oh my God.
Oh my gosh. That's a big question.
I think we're talking about some of them right now. I'd say, I don't know if there's one thing, but I will tell you is this. First of all, it's an incredible privilege to do what we do. I mean, that's number one.
Yes.
And that privilege is because we get to go to a place with another human being that almost no one else does. A therapist, maybe to a certain extent, but because we're dealing with the greatest fear of, I'm fascinated that the greatest fear is still death. I'm always fascinated because I would think it'd be snakes, but that's okay. But
Snakes for me.
it works for me too. But I am fascinated by it. But that is really the truth. That still is the number one fear. And to go through your life, and many people have that, and so and it's also that just the fear of it, and what happens with people. So it sort of encompasses all of that. So I think that by having that privilege, and sharing that, I think for me is probably the greatest part of doing what we do, because we do get to go to a place that no one else really gets to go. And the thing is, you've never met this person before, and in that moment, you're going to a place with them and never meeting them before, know nothing about them. As we know, of course, you develop a relationship with a therapist. That happens over a period of time, and but this is kind of a whole other build, because you're also dealing with somebody who's not living connected to them in that whole kind of process. So, I can't say that I sit down and I think about it, but one of the things that I really do feel quite strongly about is that privilege, and that's why that's probably why my ethics things is so strong, because I think that anybody that has that privileges, and for however they abuse it, and then there's obviously, and you gotta dig deep into wherever that means. And if you know that there's something you're crossing the line with, you personally, it's not my judgment, it's just my experience. You should be really looking at it.
Right.
So,
Hey, do you mind answering another question?
Sure. No, I don't mind at all.
This is an interesting one.
Great questions.
I mean, like, how interesting, Jose, who's a wonderful part of our show, we feel like, because we love Jose, and he has a great question for you, Suzane. How do you stop that generational karma? How do you stop it, or how do you heal it?
It's a phenomenal question, and I'm actually got that question a lot. And I'm sure that was because I mentioned the Japanese thing. I'm sure they brought about it. I don't know if you stop things. It's almost like you can't stop a dam. You can try, because it's gonna, somehow the critters or whatever are gonna get their way through. But I rather than stop it, I would say address it as much as you can, so that you don't sort of like carry it with you. Now, the question about that is it's a real loaded question, because the point is that this lifetime, and who are in our lifetimes this lifetime, we might not have never been with them before. They might come in through the back door through somebody else, so we may not have anything with them. So it's like, if you haven't built it, then if it doesn't build it, it won't come. And then we also have different lifetimes where different things are going on, and I don't think that there's a constant with other people and things of that sort. So on that level, you can't kind of really sort of stop it. So, but I'm a big one on dealing with what you can here and now. And so, because if we all know, life changes boom on a dime like that. And so, but 1 minute the person we love is here, that 1 minute they're not. And I'm sure you've all experienced the person that has jumped off the cliff and left the living person with that, because really our work is about living people, not about dead people. So I think that rather than stopping it, because like I said, you can't, it's like energy doesn't stop, it continues in one way or another. And it's like, when you've been hit in the face, you go, oh, I recognize this. This came back here again, with another person another way. But that's the way it programs. So it sounds like you're a very sweet guy, Jose, and it sounds to me like you're really really kind of on top of that process. But I would say that if you have somebody in your lineage, kind of whatever that is, that you feel like that's difficult, or because the truth is, you can't really work on a process with another person unless there's an availability with that other person. So in those contexts, you have to work with yourself. And why is this within you, and what does this mean in your process, or your evolution, or your your whole thing. It's like I could, like a very good example. I was born a caretaker. I mean, from when I was, whatever, as they say, knee high.
Yeah.
And then what do I do when I go into a caretaking profession? But I've been very challenged by that a lot. And I have to really work on it. So not so much in terms of interesting, not so much in terms of my work, because I'm able to do what I need to do to the best because in your work you can't get pulled into the emotion because you can't work to the level that you need to work from. That doesn't mean you don't have feelings for somebody and their grief and the intensity, particularly for me, people that lose children. So it's impossible to not, but in the meantime, for me to work the way that I need to, I have to, they always say, like, you can be tuned in, but being sensitive to a point is not good, because you're not going to be able to get the information that you need in clarity.
Right.
I mean, so that's a real important part. It's like
it's a real part of it, of discipline, I guess, as the medium.
It's a phenomenal amount of discipline.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, number one, you'd be a mess all the time, and number two, as you well know, you're gonna suffer physically. That's fact.
Yeah,
it's true.
That's fact. Because that if you follow a lot of traditional mediums or throughout from the Theosophic Society, how it was passed down, there were a lot of people during those periods that were very overweight, and part of that was well, because you don't look, you look fine to me, but I'm saying I'm talking about not letting it go, because what's happened is that you can't replenish that kind of loss of energy when it's non-physical. So what we do is we try to replenish it with other things, and so that's what I think that was part of the Theosophist learning. If you follow that part of that philosophy, is that you are responsible for your vehicle, because your vehicle is important in the process. Yes. And that if you take that on and you try to replenish what you've given out, because unless you actually do this work, you have known people really have no idea the amount of energy that it requires. Yes. Like you were saying earlier, Kelley, is that that you somehow your people upstairs, they say, like, she's got to chill,
Yeah, they knew.
Yeah, they know.
My business will slow down right when I need it to, and I've always, my whole life, I mean, literally since the day I was born, always been like this firm believer of, like, whatever I need kind of comes when I need it.
Yes.
And as a child, we were very, very poor, and I just knew that, like, when I needed something, I'd talk to my angels and my guides. I was very connected since birth. And I'd just be like, oh, we need this much money, or my mom's going to be homeless again, because we were homeless a lot. And, it would just appear. It would just appear $3,000. That was exactly what I talked for. And I've been able to, like, do things like that with the spirit world. Like, whenever I'm, like, down, like, just say, hey, like, I need something. I need guidance. Give me some signs telling me what direction. And they just pop in with, like, these messages for me. And I've always done that before I ever developed and became a medium. It took me forever to, like, really, like, give in to the gift, I want to say, until I was like 40, but I've always had it, and I just think it's fascinating. I'm just curious. There's a lot of great questions here, but I'm curious, what are your thoughts on reincarnation and such? Because I'm just curious what you believe in that. I know I have a lot of memories of many past lives, and the interesting thing was that I was born remembering my last life really vividly, and also remembering being in the spirit world for 13 years, meeting all my siblings, and being 3 miscarriages. I, like, vividly remember all of that. And I remember actually the physical part of being born in my whole first year of life. I remember it like my brain works like it does now, but I was in this infant body, and the body didn't work. And I remember being so frustrated that I was stuck in this, like, infant body. I do remember that, and that people were baby talking me. So I also know that, like, my angels and guides, because I kept trying to go back to the spirit world for the first 7 years. I had several near-death experiences, they kept bringing me back, telling me I was here to remember everything, and that this lifetime I was here to help families. And so I'm just curious, what you think of all of that, or like what your beliefs are on like reincarnation.
Okay, well, that's a loaded question, but I want to just return. Just by the way, you might have known this, but Edgar Casey had the same issue. He was very poor, and then when he needed money because he had a family, he would get a reading. So,
Yeah.
so that was very true of him as well. So I just say one shares these things.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think that it's like one thing doesn't sort of equal another. Everybody's process is whatever it is, and of course and most people obviously don't remember past lives because they would have a lot of problems with this one. Because you can't live. It's hard enough to live one life without living multiple lives, as they say.
Right.
So I would say in your particular case that my guessing is that was information that you needed to know for who you were, for your program,
Yeah.
whatever your soul program is,
Yeah.
and what it did is, I feel personally, it sounds to me like it validated a lot of what your experiences were. And some of us need more of that validation in the face. Like, it's impossible that how could I have been in this little body and known, it's like I knew when I was 5 years old about astrology. Now, how the hell could I know about that?
Me
Oh,
too.
did you? Did
Yeah.
you? Wow.
Yeah, and I don't know how I knew about that. My mom used to laugh because I wanted to put the quarter in the astrology machine to get my monthly horoscope. And on January 1st, I wanted the one for the whole year.
Yeah.
And I was like 3 years old, and she's like, "Why do you want this?" And I couldn't even read.
Right.
But yeah, same thing. I was obsessed with astrology. It's early on.
Right. So that's my point is that there are certain things in the program, for lack of a better word, and in the file system, and whatever it is that it needs to be for us within what particularly, honestly, if you do this, that it's shown to you in a lot of different ways, because I don't remember a time in my life that the other world didn't exist for me from 5 years on.
Yeah, yeah.
So I for me, that was kind of my deal. And
Suzanne, may I ask you, that 5 years old for you, was anyone else in your family intuitive or psychic at the time? Do you feel?
No.
Did you feel that, or
No.
you? Okay.
No. But what did happen when I was 5 years old, like, I got hit by a car, which sometimes people think that has something to do with it. I don't know. I can't say.
It knocked some sense into you to remember, maybe.
Well, what I do remember is that I got thrown down. I got hit by the car, and I went one way, and my shoes went another way.
Oh my gosh!
And I remember being in the car with my mother in the back seat crying. I mean, that part was probably the most vivid part about it. But and then I flew down, and I just had bruises on me. Like, I didn't break a bone. I had nothing.
It's a miracle.
Oh
So
my.
That's a
now,
miracle, though.
because I've done a lot of work with with IANs, people that have near-death experiences.
I
So,
love that. Yeah.
so they always want me to come because they think that that's what I had. So, and I'm not. I could have. I don't know. But I just know that I always knew things from as long as I've been alive.
As long as you've been alive.
Yeah.
And you've been seeing, do you see spirit, just for people, I mean, for people meeting you for the first time as a medium tonight, Suzanne, like, how do you receive information from spirit? How's that? Like, are you clairvoyant or clairaudient? How do you,
Well,
yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, my background was music.
Okay.
And I had been playing the piano since I was 5 years old also.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That is
so
beautiful.
My grandmother wanted an artist in the family, and that became me. And so from such a young age, my audio was always very heightened. And interesting enough, my background is in musician was a composer. I actually have a degree in it from California University, and composition. And my whole thing was that, I always felt like I was going to take somebody to the other world, because that was the kind of music that I write. And it's kind of interesting because that's what I ended up doing, just not totally in the way that I thought I was going to be doing it. And, and I'm talented. So it was clearly not my path. and I've written a symphony, I've written a ballet.
Oh my gosh.
Nice, Suzanne.
Yeah, and
It's lovely.
yeah. So when you have that kind of a talent, and it was like I fought this for a long time, and I did it for several years, and actually, believe it or not, this all came because I lived in California for 10 years, and I lived there in a time that was very different. It was in the 70s. And I got to meet some incredible people you won't know, but there was a woman by the name of the Trudy Jarno, who was an incredible woman, and used to have she was from actually was at the Holocaust as a young girl, and had this church like in the Masonic Temple. But Catherine Ponder, I got to know all these people, and they took me kind of under their wing, and I was young. And they said like, no, you will do this. And I go, oh, no, I just want to do music. I go, no, you will do. So I got to meet really an incredible amount of like gifted people. And it was literally the City of Angels. And they had a place called Manny Hall. I don't even think it exists anymore. So what you did, you had these top British mediums and all kinds of these other mediums. They would come to LA and they would lecture and they talk. And like I said, I was a kid and I got to be around all of them. So I was pretty blessed to run into that circle. Because like I said, I had lived in California 10 years, and I moved and I lived in the north, and I lived out in the middle of nowhere. I lived out in the woods without electricity and water for 3 years to kind of figure it all out. And when I moved back to the real world, I went to LA to get my degree in music. So so I was there at this really peak and quite wonderful time. And I have a very strong part of my heart in California because and I also was kind of my first school was in San Diego because my grandmother lived in San Diego. So I've got this real strong connection with California. Yeah. And I so it taught me well. And then and it prepared me for when I moved back to New York, to like New York City, like doing what I do in New York City.
There was a huge spiritual community in the 70s. I grew up in the 70s in LA and Venice.
Yes.
And I always joke around and tell everybody all my friends' parents had crystals, tarot cards, and bongs on their coffee tables. And that's what I grew up with.
Yeah.
And it was a very open talk. It was very interesting. And I started reading tarot cards when I was like 9 or 10 or whatever, I would get that instead of like regular kid gifts. I got tarot cards,
Yeah.
So I loved that time in LA, and I love that you had that experience. I wish I had. I mean, I grew up with, at the beach, but I was a little kid. But yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. So I've always, like I said, everything in life is, of course, timing, and every lifetime in this life is what it was, and because I actually was studied with she wasn't the first, she was one of the very few who was a psychic who worked with the police department. She worked with the Tuscany Police Department. And so in my studies with her, I was in this class with all these police people, all these lawyers, and all these people. And there was like me, and it was a little intimidating, but it was like I kind of became the star because it was like she was tough. She was like a triple Scorpio, and she was tough. It's like she made me stand up in front of people and give messages, and that's how I started. From the beginning of my practice, and I did it for several years. And was never going to do it professionally, and then they told me I was going to move back to New York, and I moved back to New York, and there wasn't a whole lot of things that I could do for a living, but this is what I could do. When you do what I do, at a time in New York when it was not out there,
right?
You get known really well very fast, and you get tested, boy. And and it was great. And I've never ever been sorry, actually, to be honest with you.
That's wonderful. Let's take that opportunity to really share your website, Suzanne. So, Brianna, if you could definitely put the link for Suzanne's website, SuzaneNorthrop.com. And for everyone, our listeners, please sign up for her mailing list and understand that she teaches and she does private readings. She has a monthly membership called Dead People Society, which is a great name. She has her own blog talk radio. So please put those links up, Brianna. And also, I'll be doing a demonstration with Suzane again in December 20th.
A week from
coming up.
today.
Is it a week from today?
It is.
So we'd love to have everyone join us. You'll be with Suzane and I will be doing mediumship readings. Maybe we'll do psychic readings too. We'll be guided by spirit, and that's online, right, Suzane? So we're going to be doing on Zoom online, December 20th.
Yeah, I think this is like our third or fourth time. One of those times.
Yeah, one of those times. Yeah. So we'd love to have everyone join us. And Suzane has so much knowledge. And really, just to share with you, the information that came through each time it's amazing. And I think we have a good vibe together. You know, I love working with Suzane.
Works out kind of really well. And I think it's interesting because I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I never Zoomed before the pandemic. And the thing is that, you know, I mean, I think some of the nice things about it is that because there are people that, you know, for whatever reason, they can't travel. They're in their homes and you can have like all family members come through at the same time. And so that is kind of cool because I don't know about you, but like during the pandemic, I mean, I saw people in Israel and Japan and Australia and all over the world. And they had other family members that were in different areas. And it was nice. We all kind of get together. So that's kind of been really, really cool about it. So the fact that you could be in California and I could be in New York.
I know.
I love that about Zoom. I do.
Yeah. So that's
good. You know,
and it gets recorded because, you know, you don't remember. You just don't remember.
If you remember to record it, somebody like me, I forget sometimes.
Yeah. Our events.
I'm notorious for that too.
I'm so bad with that. I get I'm in the zone. I'm not in my tech zone, you know?
Yeah. So when you do join our events, they are recorded and everyone gets a recording. Definitely, because there's always so much going by, so much happening, you know, and you might hear something new even from someone else's reading.
Yes.
That might hit home for you as well.
Right.
Right.
Well, I'm sure you're aware when you do groups, and I don't care if it's 10 people or 40 people, is that there's usually almost always a theme. There's almost always the same kind of, it's either one thing of brothers or one thing of sisters or one thing that it's like always fascinating to me, and how there really is an energy and what we pull in for that moment. And with that moment, there is always a theme that runs through, and I say like, oh yeah, we had another one of those. And then it's not only the passing, but it's the kind of information that sort of like comes through, which I find is totally fascinating. As long as I've been doing this work 40 years, I'm still fascinated by how the themes kind of like always sort of like come through. So that's actually kind of a nice thing too. And that is what it is nice to have actually it recorded, because because people do go brain dead, as you all know.
Oh yeah.
And this way they can, go back and say like, oh wow, I didn't get that at that moment, and now I can hear it again. So that's kind of a cool thing also.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
That happens sometimes in my one-on-one readings. I'll have a whole week where all of a sudden I'm doing readings for all these parents that lost a son, and then the next week I'm doing a reading for all of these parents or these adults whose father died, who was an alcoholic. Like I get these themes. I feel like weekly themes, not just in events.
I think that that's true also. There is, there is. And
I often think like, am I just making this up? Am I stuck on dead dads that were alcoholics this week? But I know, but I know I'm not. I mean, it's just so interesting how it happens.
They all want to come through.
I'm gonna give you a real quick example of that. When my nephew died, which was in January, and I hadn't done any large events. I mean, until like several months later. And so it was in Connecticut, and I was probably 200, 300 people in the room. And it was the weirdest thing because it was right after he died. And all I can tell you, it was a room full of kids. And I just like said, can I have like a mother? Nothing personal, but it was like, how they have in hotels, or they have those dividers things,
Right.
For the room. They were
Ballroom.
moving. They were moving.
No way.
People were getting freaked out.
Wow. That's
And I
crazy.
kept saying, I said, you little shit, will you cut this out? I mean, you're freaking people out. But it was just, it was like, and I could see him saying like, come on to the room. My aunt will talk to you. My aunt. I could see him like doing that.
Ah,
But it was really freaky. I can't. There must have been like 30 kids that day that showed up. It was
my.
just. I was exhausted by the end of the
How
night.
beautiful. Yeah. Very
But it was-
emotional.
But that's kind of a perfect example of what you were saying,
Yeah.
Kelley. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what happened to me when my son passed away. He was 20, and 2 weeks later, we had already scheduled. Allison and I had a small group reading for 12 families, and I was going to cancel, and I was actually going to quit my mediumship because I was so distraught.
Mhm.
And 3 different medium friends from around the country reached out and said, "Are you quitting? Your son says don't quit. Keep going." And I was like, "Okay." So I chose to do the event with Allison 2 weeks after my son passed, and it's
My.
12 people, and every one of them lost a son who was 20.
Hmm.
And I mean,
Oh,
that was lined up before he passed, so the universe already knew I was going to lose my child.
Right.
And
yeah.
and I looked at Allison and said, "I'm going to run out this door and leave." And
Don't leave.
she's like, "No, we can do this." And so we did.
Yeah.
It was the most, I feel like the most amazing group, like small group reading I have ever done,
Yeah.
because it was so
Validating.
intense and so amazing,
Yeah.
and so much information came through because I was, really deep in my grief, but raw, like cracked open in a sense.
Of course.
And it was quite healing for me.
Yes. Of
Because
course.
all these parents were at different levels of their grief. Some were recent, some were had been,
Hmm.
it had been like 10 years, right?
Right. Yeah.
I felt so, for me, it's like I needed that myself as a medium.
Yes.
Mhm.
That was my healing.
Yeah.
And then I thought, okay, I feel a little selfish now that I'm taking from this.
Yes.
But it
That's
was
how
That's okay.
how I felt when I did that. Like I said,
Yes.
that first huge event, and it was just like, I mean, it was. If you weren't in that room, you would have not have believed it. That's all I can tell
right.
you.
It's just so amazing, the energy when you do get that way. But I just think, like, how amazing is a spirit roll that they lined this up before I even knew anything.
Right.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, because there's something's already in the program. I mean,
Yeah,
first of all, the soul knows 4 to 6 months it's going to cross over anyway. So
exactly.
that becomes that program is kind of all that. I had one event. It was really funny. I was doing in Boston, and a bunch of the whole back row were a group of firemen, and like they're all coming through at the same time. And would you know that every alarm went off in that hotel?
Is that right?
Everybody had to leave the hotel.
That is hilarious.
It's like everybody had, and it was like, I kept saying, "Could you guys? I'm okay. You have to show up, but you don't have to do your thing."
They do. They do.
I always get iPhones talking, Siri, when I'm doing like groups. Everybody's iPhone will start talking and
Is
be
that
like,
right? Oh my
"I don't
gosh.
understand what you're saying." Siri
Oh
says
my
that.
gosh.
I'll get like 3 or 4 people in the audience that happens to. It's so weird when that happens. And
So
I think it's like spirit wanting to get like center stage,
They, they do.
because
They
it makes
do.
people like awe, but also laugh.
Yeah.
well, guys, the time has flown, I have to say,
Yes.
and I know we only have a few minutes left. And just to share with everyone is, well, Suzane, we'd love, of course, to have you back for another show. I mean, just talking about the whole psychic investigation with the police department. I mean, that is a whole big deal. I'd love to ask you more about. Isn't that fascinating? Kelley. And Kelley, I want to take this time and talk about your events. I know you have a crystal store coming open
Oh yeah,
soon.
that's been quite an ordeal getting set up, but we're on this mission. We had planned to get set up like mid this month, but it's being pushed out to next month. So I will be opening. But yeah, I'm excited about that. We're doing an event with you and I, Cheryl, with Kimberly next weekend.
Yeah, Kimberly
And next
Meredith.
week we have no show. We're taking that off for
That's
what is
right.
next week?
Well,
take off the 20th or the 27th?
The 20th.
Yeah, we're taking off the 20th for the holidays. So we will maybe play a replay.
That's us.
Yeah.
You and I are on the 20th.
Suzane and I will be on the 20th. We'll be doing our event that evening, so everyone could come to our event.
And then, and in 2 weeks, I'll have announcements for events. I put everything on hold because of my move and
Yeah.
setting up a new crystal store. I had to get my mind straight. I couldn't
Yeah.
focus on next year's events. So
Yeah, right.
most of my events are on hold right now, but I will be opening things back up in 2 weeks. Everybody will hear what's going on starting January.
Oh, good, good,
Sounds
good,
great.
good.
Sounds great.
Go ahead, Cheryl. What do you got?
Well, I just wanted to once again remind everyone that Suzanne and I have a wonderful event coming up December 20th. And you can get tickets on the links below. Thanks, Brianna, for posting those. You can also get tickets through SuzanneNorthrop.com website or myself, MediumCheryl.com website. We'd love to see you there. It's a lovely evening where we really try to do as many readings as we can with the time we have. So it's really pretty amazing every time the right people seem to get together and just create this beautiful, really harmonious experience that's very memorable. So I'd love to see everyone there. And once again, Suzanne, I want to thank you so much for being on the show tonight. It's just been such a joy. And gosh, I mean, there's just so much experience you've gone through. We'd love to, have you share that with us some more, if you don't mind. And once again, everyone, go to SuzanneNorthrop.com. Find out about her mediumship. I mean, her mentorship or her monthly membership program she has. It's called Dead People Society. She also has isn't that a great name? And that Suzanne, you coined that term, right? You coined it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
I
Katrina,
love
it is online. Katrina's
Yes,
asking, is it online on 20? Yes,
you.
it's on Zoom.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So our event's online, right? It's going to be on Zoom. When you sign up with a ticket, we'll be sure and send you out some links to remind you. And yeah, so we would love to see everyone there. So
Okay.
everyone, thank you again for joining us this
Yeah.
evening. We want to wish you a wonderful week.
Thank
and
you
we
for
will.
inviting me, by the way.
Oh,
Well,
you're
thank you for
welcome.
coming on our show. We're so honored.
It worked out just perfectly to have you on, and with your busy schedule, I'm glad you can make it tonight.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Take care.
All right, guys, everyone. Thank you
Happy
very
holidays,
much.
everybody. We'll be back
Happy
after
holidays.
Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
guys. Namaste. Have a beautiful evening.
Yeah, you too.